really 90% of the time you're doing stuff around data, and then it's actually like 10% machine learning. I'm not somebody who's academically trained as a machine learning engineer. I'm not from a practical technology standpoint. Julia is an open source programming language. A lot of the things that I learned at NASA.
Hi everyone, welcome back to elearningbridge. I hope you guys are doing good and staying safe. So in today's podcast, we will be having a discussion about machine learning engineering, and you will love this podcast. Why? Because along with machine learning engineering, we will talk about a new language which is coming into the market, that is Julia language. And for this podcast, we have a very special guest, Logan, not Logan Paul. Logan Kilpatrick, and he's working as a machine learning engineer at Apple, and before that he also worked with NASA. So that's why watch this podcast till the end, because you will get to know interesting facts about machine learning engineering and how you can make your career into this domain, what all things you need to learn to become a good machine learning engineer, what qualifications and everything we will talk about, and about the Julia language, because Logan is working as a community manager for Julia language. It is purely open source, so you can also contribute into it. I will put all the important links in the description. You can reach out to him, you can connect with the Julia language community and contribute to it. And after that we will discuss about his journey at NASA and what all things he learned there and how he became a good machine learning engineer. And after watching this video, if you like it, then make sure to give a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and if you are new to the channel, then make sure to subscribe and press the notification icon so that you are updated with all the new podcasts on my channel. And a really big thanks to Crio.Do for sponsoring this video. Crio.Do is a kind of platform which believes in learning by doing. So if you are someone who want to make their career in the full stack development and backend development and want to crack good product based companies, then they have prepared really amazing development courses for you, which is based on the latest technologies and real world projects. So use the link which is in the description. It is valid till 31st July. Get the extra discount using my coupon code, and when you will click on that link, you will land onto this home screen
where you can see some important things will be provided to you free of cost, like the product based company interviews, free guide for best resumes, and one coupon code will be unlocked which you can use to get the extra 10% off, including 30% scholarship. And also this will be applicable till 31st July, and using this promo code you can enroll yourself in their amazing programs which is actually dedicated towards the highly demanding profiles, full stack developer and the backend developer. You can see all the details here, like the duration of the programs, what kind of tech stack you will be learning, and the best thing is that you will be creating the projects which are actually the real world use cases and equivalent to those projects which you get a chance to work during your internships. So those practical projects will give you amazing learnings, first of all, and second thing is that you can mention these projects in your profile, which will help you to stand out from the crowd, and it will seek the attention of good product based company recruiters. And they also have third amazing programs like fellowship program in software development, free trial available, and extensive hours of training during this program, assured scholarship after the trial if you are able to prove yourself, and very important, placement guarantee. So this kind of benefits you will be getting.
So now quickly jump on to our podcast part.
So thank you so much, Logan, for joining us on this podcast. Guys, we will be having a discussion about something really interesting which even I heard for the very first time. So just watch this podcast till the end, and you will basically learn a lot from Logan's journey and what he is actually doing in the field of machine learning. So Logan, can you give a short introduction about yourself to my audience and what is your background?
Yeah, sure. I'm super excited to be here, and hopefully, building it up to be a great conversation. I'm hopeful that folks will be able to take away some positive things in their own life as far as their machine learning journey and their sort of professional career. So at the present moment, I serve as the community manager for the Julia programming language. If folks aren't familiar with Julia, it's a high-level dynamic programming language similar to Python, but it's sort of specifically designed for a lot of these more data science / machine learning use cases, which makes it super unique. And then outside of that, I'm a applied machine learning engineer. So sort of living the best of both worlds, if you will, and getting to work on the open source projects, and then also get to work in industry on some sort of actual practical applications of a lot of these different machine learning frameworks and tools.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Logan, for introducing yourself. So now we will actually jump on to his machine learning background or what he has done so far. So he'll explain these things to all the aspiring machine learning engineers. So Logan, being a machine learning engineer, what they actually do, because there is a lots of noise between different roles in the big data domain, whether it is applied scientists, research scientists, data scientists, and then machine learning engineers. So what they actually do?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think, there's definitely a lot of noise, as you said, around what these roles actually are.
Yeah.
I think I sort of have two different responses to this. I think the first one is that, one of the dirty little secrets of machine learning and data scientists in sort of the real world and the practical settings is that, I almost think this is different from what it's like in the context of school and learning and things like that. In those contexts, a lot of the stuff that you're actually doing is around applying the machine learning tools, understanding the machine learning tools. And that's obviously a huge component when you get a job as a machine learning engineer. But another huge component is actually just working with the data, because if you understand machine learning, you understand that the only sort of way to solve a machine learning problem is by having good data and understanding that data. So the sort of ongoing joke with folks that I work with is that it's really 90% of the time you're doing stuff around data, and then it's actually like 10% machine learning. That's obviously it might be sort of exaggerated a bit, but that's sort of the general idea. Honestly, is that there's a lot more thought that goes into the data when you're doing one of these real world applications. And again, in a sort of academic setting where you're just taking some machine learning technique and applying it onto a bunch of already existing data sets, you don't have to think about that because the data is clean. It's been used by 1,000 other researchers. And that's one of the practical challenges of machine learning in sort of the real world.
To become a good machine learning engineer, what kind of qualification skill set is needed, right? And even sometimes folks have confusions like whether they should have a master's degree or PhD sort of stuff to pursue their career into this machine learning engineering. So what's your thought on that?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I'll actually just generally remark that if folks have sort of seen, from a career perspective, what my journey has looked like, I'm not somebody who's academically trained as a machine learning engineer. I'm not somebody who has a tremendous amount of machine learning experience, truthfully. I think I'm sort of just getting to the arc of this learning journey that I've been on in the machine learning space. So I'm sort of with everyone who's listening to this and sort of just still trying to figure things out in a lot of ways. But I do think that there's a bunch of different ways that you can sort of approach this from a qualification or from a school perspective. There's obviously a lot of people who have PhDs and are sort of in that domain, in that field. And this again might not be true in all the cases, but I tend to think of those folks sort of as the leaders and as the people who are really helping share out that knowledge. Like I can speak to some of the experiences I've had on teams that are doing machine learning. The folks who have PhDs are the go-to resources, but there's obviously people who are on the team who don't have a PhD, who did a master's in data science, or who just, in my case, I just have an undergraduate degree in computer science, not even specifically data science, and I'm able to go and contribute on these machine learning fronts. So the caveat to all of this is it depends on, as an individual, what sort of understanding you want of all the different nitty gritty things. Like obviously the people who have a PhD and spent 7 years researching, specific machine learning technology, they have a lot more understanding of the underlying details of all these machine learning systems, and they can go and pick up an academic paper and understand what's happening in there. I don't have that knowledge. I look at an academic paper that's talking about machine learning stuff, and I'm like, who understands this stuff? Because it's super complicated. It's way over my head. But that doesn't mean that I can't go and look at some of these tools that exist out there and apply those in the context of machine learning and have success doing that. And along the way, hopefully learn some of those things that the folks who have PhDs and more domain specific knowledge actually understand.
Yeah, cool. So, and Logan, in addition to that, can you specifically talk about some particular skill sets? Like most of the aspiring engineers exactly look for the crisp roadmap kind of thing. Okay, I need to learn this language, I need to learn this framework. So, can you just throw some light on that as well? That specifically you should have a good expertise on these kind of skill sets.
Yeah, good question. I think, and this might not be, I don't know if this falls under the skill set category perhaps, but I think about it in the context of tooling and things like that. Like, I think, having a good understanding of, what are the different machine learning frameworks that exist out there. I think one of the practical realities is, for people who are coming fresh out of school, you're not going into a setting where they're going to be like, create the next generation of machine learning technology. Like, practically speaking, you're going to be hired and they're going to say, okay, use the tools that already exist out there in the real world and apply those to this specific problem and help us solve this problem with machine learning. So understanding what the tools actually are, whether it's TensorFlow, PyTorch, Flux in the Julia world, like understanding what those tools are and how to use them at a high level, I think is the most important skill. If you have done tutorials and built, actual machine learning workflows and all these different tools, you're going to be better served and you're going to be well off. And obviously you can sort of go a step further, but that's my general sense and framework. You don't need to have all this deep expertise. Just go and solve problems using some of these tools.
You have been working as a community manager for the Julia language, and you have been an active open source contributor as well. So I would definitely like to know about what is Julia language, because this was the term which I was hearing for the very first time. So how it is different from other languages and where can we use it?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is something that I enjoy talking about a ton because, I sort of, I'm obviously biased. I think Julia is a great language. I think super interesting ecosystem, but I also truly believe that it's a very unique opportunity for students to come in, learn the language, contribute to the ecosystem, and do something that sort of is larger than oneself. And I think, again, you talk about this in the context of some of these other tools and frameworks, and, they're so popular and everybody uses Python. And I saw this thing that like 30% of all code is written in Python. And like, there's a tremendous amount of noise. And, you go and do something and it's hard to quantify the impact of that. And I think what I appreciate about doing Julia stuff at the moment, and again, this is just for me personally, is, I can go and do something and I can directly see the impact on the community, on the people using, the tools that I'm talking about. So it's very rewarding for me in that sense. And I think in these other domains and these other industries and tools and things like that, it's not the case. So that's my sort of high level pitch as far as, getting folks excited. But from a practical technology standpoint, Julia is an open source programming language, similar to many of the other programming languages that exist out there, similar syntactically to Python, very much in that sort of technical computing, scientific computing domain. It sort of has a lot of the analog features that R or MATLAB have. So you can use it to solve a lot of those same sort of problems, data science, machine learning, but obviously also a general purpose programming language. If you want to do web development or something like that, that exists. It's just less of the primary focuses of the language.
So one quick question here, Logan. So if it is similar to the Python stuff, like Julia language is a bit similar to the Python one, so does it solve machine learning problems as well? Like, can machine learning engineers use it to solve their problems?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, and I haven't sort of mentioned why somebody would want to use Julia over one of these existing tools. But the reality is especially in those machine learning / data science contexts, Julia is a better suited tool for the job. And you don't actually need to take my word for this. Like, if you go and look at some of these high level machine learning frameworks in Python, go and look at the repository. They didn't write the code in Python. It's C++ code that they've written a wrapper on top of, and under the hood, it's really a C++ machine learning library. So, Python isn't the best tool for the job. Python is just an accessible language that people know, and they've used that and they bundled that on top of C++, or whatever the underlying structure is. And you don't see that in the Julia case. Flux.jl is the de facto machine learning tool in the Julia ecosystem, and it's written in 100% Julia. So that's another cool part that, for me personally, as far as like contributing to an open source project, if I want to go and make contributions to Flux or not Flux, if PyTorch or any of these other tools, you don't just need to know Python. You need to know C++ or whatever the underlying language is that they're wrapping on top of. And what's cool about Julia is you write your code in Julia, and you can go look at the source code, and it's the same. It's Julia the whole way down, which is really cool. And same thing for the core language. You can go and make a contribution to the actual core Julia language, and the language is written in Julia itself. So it's nice and it's convenient in that sense. But also, again, from a benefit standpoint, Julia is really well suited for these like data intensive, computationally complex problems. And the reason is the intentional design of the language. It's a JIT compiled language, so you have just-in-time compilation, and you also have the sort of built-in ability to handle a lot of these super data intensive, computationally difficult things, which again, Python as a language, it's great, it's accessible, everybody loves it, but it's not built to solve those problems. It was built to be accessible, and they've sort of done some things after the fact with Python and Pandas and a lot of these other packages to sort of try to help solve this problem, but it's again, fundamentally not built to solve the problem that it's being used for.
I think for me, it's the time to explore Julia language as well. So
I got one user. It worked.
Yeah, yes, you got me one. So thank you so much, Logan. I think this was really interesting. I mean, knowing about the new languages and which are specifically designed for the core problems. So it's really interesting. I think whoever is watching this video, if you are an aspiring engineer, definitely you should look at different options, and Julia would be the one of them. So Logan, one more. Yeah.
Really quickly, I'll just say that I think in the context of like thinking about what the next 15 to 20 years look like, the reality is problems that humans are trying to solve, and you can think about this context of medicine and climate change and all these other things, are becoming more difficult. Like they're becoming like much grander problems. We're not just trying to, make a banking application now. We're trying to build climate models to simulate like all the crazy stuff that happens. And we need different tools. And I think that Julia is one of those tools, but I'm sure that there's going to be other tools that come along the way that are part of that solution to these huge problems that we're trying to solve as humans, as scientists, as computer scientists. So I'm super excited, and I think for students, it's such an incredible moment and opportunity.
Great. And Logan, so since it's an open source, so I think students can also contribute in this project as well. So guys, if there will be any kind of important links to participate or to contribute in this project, or even to look at the documentation, whatever are the links available, I'll definitely put it in the description. Logan, please do share it with me, and definitely I'm pretty sure that you guys will explore this new language, and definitely will contribute to it as well. So yes, so how's the general interview process of machine learning engineer? I think for experience, it could be different. And I think even you have started your career in machine learning engineer, not that much experience like 5-10, but you have a decent experience in that. You have been into that phase of being fresher into it. So what's the general interview process looks like?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I will say that, sort of had an interesting path to get to the point where I'm at. So when I sort of started my career, I didn't start it as a machine learning engineer. So the role that I have now as an applied machine learning engineer, I actually did an interview for that job, which is somewhat unique. I have that job now, but I started as a software engineer and transitioned to this role. So I didn't have to go through the general interview process. But what I will say for folks, and this is a sort of a general piece of advice. I think there's a lot of topic and a lot of conversation around like how to prepare for interviews and all this sort of stuff. And my personal feeling, and I could be wrong about this, so I'd love to hear people's thoughts and things. But my personal philosophy is I don't prepare for interviews. I don't intentionally go out and like do practice for like interviews specifically. Like I know a lot of people do like coding challenges in their free time and things like that to prepare for some of these interviews. My feeling is, life is short. It seems long, but it's relatively short. Do things that actually matter. Do things that make contributions beyond sort of the specific thing that you're trying to do. And those always pay dividends. I've seen this in my own life so much. Not trying to go and sort of optimize for an interview experience, but instead optimize for creating something and giving that back to other people. One of the ways that I think this is that I've sort of been doing this on my machine learning journey is on Stack Overflow. And people might think that this sounds interesting or weird or what have you, but one of my favorite things to do now from a learning perspective, which I also think pays a ton of dividends in the interview process, is going and posting questions on Stack Overflow of things that I don't understand. And that might seem straightforward, but I don't think that it's something that people do enough. Like if you're sort of starting your machine learning journey as a freshman or just at the beginning of this long journey, figure out what the questions are, figure out what you don't know, go and post those questions on Stack Overflow with the caveat of hopefully trying to find your own answer. It's this really nice self-guided sort of process that you go through. And you can see this on my Stack Overflow. I do this all the time. I go and ask a question like, how to define a training loop in Flux.jl, which is, again, the Julia machine learning package. And then I don't just go and post that blindly. I then go and try to answer my own question. And you have this learning process. And Stack Overflow has the functionality for self-answered questions built in. So not only do I get to sort of sit back, figure out a well-formulated question, which is, again, theoretically a question that somebody could ask you in an interview. So I get to think about the question and then go find the answer or go and interact with a community of people and try to find the answer to that question. So it sort of pays dividends in so many different ways. You're giving back to people. You're getting to think about sort of how to construct a good, well-written question. And then you also, again, take away that knowledge. Now I know how to define a training loop. I know how to do, gradient descent, whatever the specific thing is. And I think that is so much more helpful in an interview process going through that than it is to just go and knock out a bunch of like random programming problems that are just go into the abyss after you're done solving. The personal philosophy is that like, and this, again, maybe this isn't the right approach to doing it. This is just something that I feel, but like, you're almost not being genuine if you have to go and like prepare for an interview. And obviously like, don't just show up and like not know anything about the company or not have any well thought questions. That's not what I'm advocating. I'm advocating from like a technical side. If you have to go and like build some new technical skills in order to prepare for an interview, perhaps the job or the specific company like isn't the right thing for you at that moment. And again, that shouldn't dissuade people from applying for things that they're not qualified for. Like you should always go for it, and there's no reason not to. But that's my general framework. Like if I don't have the skills right now to succeed in whatever that role is, doing a bunch of programming challenges or what have you isn't going to help me in that sense. Like those aren't the problems that people are solving at these companies. It's just like it's a gatekeeping mechanism for them to sort of think that they're hiring smarter or better engineers or whatever it is.
You have worked with NASA as well. Like probably it was your, I think, turning point for your career. So I would like to know about your learnings, like working with NASA engineers, and what all things you learn there as a fresher.
Yeah, this is a good question. So I started interning at NASA. I forgot, probably it was back in like 2017 or 2018, something like that. So I ended up staying there for around 3 years as an intern and as a contractor. So it was definitely a super interesting experience. And I would 100% agree. One of the turning points for me in my career, that was sort of my first big break, if you will. So again, super grateful for all the folks who were so helpful to me at NASA. But yeah, it's, one of a lot of the things that I learned at NASA were I think less technical, actually. I think, obviously it's, there's tons of technical stuff, but a lot of the sort of technical lessons and details sort of fade away into the back of your mind. But it was, again, sort of a lot more of these like personal journeys and lessons and things like that. But one of the interesting things about NASA is the projects a lot of the time that are taking place. They have these incredibly long timelines, and there's a bunch of awesome folks at NASA who have spent, greater parts of their career working on just preparing for some of these missions. And people, again, who, these people aren't going to space. They're scientists who are helping develop these missions just to get to the point of like launching a satellite into space or sending a rover to the moon or to Mars. And I was super fortunate enough to work with some of these people and see the amount of dedication that they had to sort of, spend years on a research project and then see that research project transition from being sort of a loosely constructed concept to being a pivotal part of some of these upcoming missions. And again, I got to be a part of that for 3 years. And it was, again, so interesting to see the transition happen and see the incredible hard work that the folks at NASA put in. So, incredible experience. If you have the chance to work with folks at NASA, I would take advantage of it. The other thing that I'll point out for people and students is, again, you have conversations with people and you talk about NASA and everyone's like, wow, you must be really smart. Everybody must be a rocket scientist or whatever. It's not the case. I would say a majority of the work that's happening at NASA has nothing to do with rocket science. There's so many domains. I worked with people who were biologists interested in plants and things like that. And the NASA center I was working at specifically had a bunch of these like plant experiments, which were super interesting and I know nothing about, but it's across every domain, even scientific education and sort of just, being an ambassador of science. There's a ton of people just focus on that. How can NASA support the idea of helping people all around the world sort of have a better understanding and a better relationship with science? So if that's something that you're excited about, NASA has that as well, which is super awesome.
Since last couple of years, I'm definitely hearing this term like open source contribution, and students are taking part in good numbers. So according to you, how it can actually help them?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is something that I fundamentally see a shift happening with students. At a really high level, the reason why I think open source is so empowering is because there's so much less gatekeeping. If you want to go and contribute to an open source project, nobody cares what you don't have to tell them your GPA and a pull request and what school you went to and all the classes you've taken. None of that matters. What matters is whether you're making a contribution and sort of doing the work. And I love that. I think as much as we can sort of take down these barriers for people who are trying to do something positive, that's the most important thing that can happen. So use that as sort of an empowering factor. But from a practical standpoint, I think a lot of people, don't end up contributing to open source because they sort of look it up and they see what it's all about online. And it's just, a bunch of, you look at a code base for some huge machine learning library and you're like, okay, how am I supposed to do anything with this? Like, what is the practical next step for me to take? And what I think is that, again, it's this perception/marketing problem with open source in that, your first step in open source, making contribution, is not going to one of these massive machine learning libraries and trying to open a pull request to add some new thing like that. Maybe that is you and that's your first contribution and that's awesome. But, I feel like I'm part of the 99% of people that's not the case for. Like, my open source contributions a lot of the time have nothing to do with code. I'm, again, opening a question on Stack Overflow. I'm making a blog post. I'm participating in a podcast like this and sort of sharing some of this knowledge that I have. All of these things I classify as an open source contribution, and they don't necessarily show up on my GitHub profile. So I really think that there's this arc that people and students specifically have to be aware of. And sort of the tail end of that arc is, in my opinion, making these code contributions to an open source project. It's not the first thing that you do. So don't feel discouraged if you're like, I don't know where to start, or I don't know what that code contribution looks like. That's totally fine. Do all the other things first. Go and host a session at your local university, talk to your friends about open source, write a blog post, do whatever it is. You don't need to commit code right away. You'll get there. But even for me at this point in my journey, I feel like I've been doing open source for a couple of years now, and I still feel like there's a lot more that I have to learn before I can be super comfortable contributing to some large project. And people need, like, these open source projects, they need these contributions. This is sort of the whole reason I ended up spawning into the role as the community manager for the Julia language. Like, there was all the, incredible amount of smart, super technical people working on the language and all these, but there's all of these like loose areas where there's like no one clearly doing the job of like helping connect all these things and work on the community and develop these resources for people. That's where a lot of the opportunities that I see in open source are right now. And again, those are just as important, if not more important. You can have the coolest technical thing in the world. If people don't know about it, if they don't know how to use it, if they're not comfortable with sort of the processes to go through, none of that stuff matters. So you need all those other things in addition to having a great technical product. So there's so many different places to contribute. And I'll plug the Julia language. This is something that we're working on through Google Season of Doxes. We have a technical writer that's helping us sort of craft this narrative around, open source contributions aren't just committing to the core Julia repository as part of the language. Like, there's all these other things that you can do. And hopefully we'll have some guides and things like that for folks who are interested in making those contributions.
So that was all in this podcast, guys. I hope you would have enjoyed the entire conversation or the experience which Logan has shared about the machine learning engineering, his background, his experience, skill sets, qualification, and most important about the Julia language. So thank you so much, Logan, for joining us and sharing this wonderful information. I really like the entire information, and I think I got a new opportunity to explore something new, which is Julia language. I'll put all the important links in the description, guys. Definitely check that out. From my side and my audience side, Logan, thank you very much.
This was great. And I think for students and things listening to this, like listening to this podcast and just the fact of like coming here and being part of this, I think is a super important step. So you're ahead of a lot of these other students and people in that way. So, take what you will from this conversation and run with it. And I'm excited for everybody. I think the future is bright.
I hope you guys would have enjoyed this conversation with Logan. And if you did, then make sure to like and share this video with your friends. If you are new to the channel, then subscribe and press the notification icon. I'll see you guys in next weekend with another amazing podcast. Till then, just stay safe, stay home, take care of yourself and your family too.